Good morning, world. The Atheist community of Austin are proud sponsors of that wonderful show, The Atheist Experience, with today's special guest, Rohan Wynar. We have our co-host, Martin Wagner, will be bringing you all the national and local news, secular news, and then back to our host here. Yes, it is, Jeff D. Take it away, Jeff.
Morning, folks. Welcome to The Atheist Experience. I am your host, Jeff D. The Atheist Experience is brought to you by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting the separation of church and state and positive atheism. We are live April 9, 2000 CE. My co-host is Martin Thomas, and our guest today is Martin Thomas. What'd I say?
You said Martin Thomas.
Martin Wagner.
Martin Thomas worked for me, but there were two Martins on Hepcats.
I don't know how that got mixed up in my notes.
I got that right, Jeff. Give me a break.
I was messing with Ray about his intro this morning. Okay, you got me. I'm all mixed up now. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday morning at the Hot Jumbo Bagel Shop, 307 West 5th Street at 10:30 a.m. right after the show, except for the first Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at 11 a.m. at Furr's Cafeteria. Our next lecture will be on May 7. ACA board meetings take place at noon right after our regular meeting. On the second Sunday of every month, these meetings are open to all ACA members, but you can only vote if you're on the board of directors. This month's board meeting takes place today. Let's see. The Godless Gamers meet every Monday night at 7 p.m. I did get that correctly.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
At the home of Vic Farrow. For more information, you can call our voicemail at 371-2911 or visit our website at www.atheist-community.org. This show can also be seen on the internet. Set your browser to spring.net. And if you have friends or loved ones who live far away or far enough away that they don't get cable, or even right in Austin and they don't get cable, let them know. www.spring.net at 9 a.m. every Sunday. That's us. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here today.
And you're going to be telling us today about wacky things happening with the Buddhists?
Well, I think one of the interesting issues about atheism that doesn't quite pan out much to the general community is that atheists are not just in particular opposed to the lunacy spread by Christians all over the world. There's fundamental lunacy spread by many, many, many other religious organizations.
Right.
And right now in the United States, at least, there's a real big trend to line up behind the Dalai Lama and sort of do whatever this man who writes books about being very spiritual and having wonderful, happy lives, and do sort of whatever he says, including those things that he says that are political. And he says a lot of very political things. And
we're gonna get to your full thing.
Well, this is sort of the guts of what I'm going to talk about, is that there are plenty of other things that atheists have reasons to complain about as well.
Yeah, we're always getting that from callers.
Why do you always pick on Christians?
Yeah, it's always hatred from Christians. I was just watching the show that you hosted on tape this morning.
We got a couple of those, didn't we?
Yeah. It's not. We are not against Christians. We are against silly beliefs based on nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, and those come from all over the place.
Right.
Would you like to do your news?
Yes, I guess it's time for the news this morning.
Let's do your news.
And it is as coherent as I will be about it, since I have been up rather early this morning. So we'll just I'll just get started. Some stuff happening this week of great import. The school prayer hearings are continuing with the there I am with the Supreme Court. Concerning the Santa Fe high school case. And here's some news on that. Amid a fierce battle over constitutional ideology, lawyers from the two sides of the Santa Fe prayer case momentarily put aside their differences Wednesday. Just minutes before he was set to go to battle in what may prove to be one of the most important cases the High Court hears this session, Jay Sekulow, the lawyer fighting on behalf of the school district, introduced his wife and son to Anthony Griffin, the civil rights attorney fighting the school district's pregame prayer policy. Minutes later, Sekulow began what turned out to be a lively hour-long debate in which a majority of the justices indicated that they might be opposed to the school district's policy. Seculo contended the school district had adopted a neutral policy that allowed only for the possibility of a prayer before a football game. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg asked whether the policy was truly neutral in the messages it allowed. Would, for instance, somebody be able to get up and say, quote, "break some necks, buckle down, boys," she asked. I don't know why she came up with that phrase as opposed to many others, but there we are. Seculo emphasized that the policy the district had written, which allowed an elected student to deliver a, quote, "message and or invocation," was fully within the constitutionality of the First Amendment. The justices were clearly divided on the issue of whether the district policy could pass constitutional muster, and at times seemed to debate the issue among themselves through the lawyers. Justice David Souter appeared to have a problem with students delivering a religious message before a captive audience. He said the atmosphere of the game meant that students exercised no real choice in avoiding the prayer, and that it required students, quote, "to sit there while a prayer is going on." Well, yeah. Seculo argued that the policy remained neutral in allowing students to deliver a message that promoted good sportsmanship in a competitive atmosphere. But both Souter and Ginsburg said a truly neutral policy would allow a wide variety of opinions over a long period. Quote, "I don't think anybody's going to get up there and say religion is bunk," Souter said. Throughout the pretrial analysis...
I would. I'd be happy to.
I think his point is
that they wouldn't be allowed to.
They wouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah. Throughout the pretrial analysis, legal experts and court watchers have said that if the district's lawyers stood a chance of winning, they would have to persuade Justice Anthony Kennedy that the policy passed muster. And at times, he seemed most critical of the district's policy. Quote, "We're looking for some mechanism to ensure neutrality, and we haven't seen what it is," he told Seculo. Seculo said the policy was neutral because it opened the forum to a vote of the students. He said the decision to say a prayer rested in the hands of an individual student who was a, quote, "circuit breaker who determines the message." But Kennedy seemed to think voting on freedom of speech issues was what the Constitution aimed to stop. Quote, "I think the election thing doesn't work," he said. "It seems to me that that's the kind of thing the Establishment Clause seeks to prevent." The heated debate continued as Griffin stepped up to present his case. Ginsburg asked whether he would be opposed to the policy even if it regulated messages at band concerts and plays and other extracurricular events. Griffin said he would oppose it because the question was not where the message took place, but whether the Constitution allowed a majority group to decide constitutional issues. That's what is at the crux of it. Justice Antonin Scalia seemed to give at least some credit to the school's district policy, since it does, on a facial review, allow both religious and secular messages. Quote, "You can't say that in every case it's going to produce a prayer," he said. Griffin also addressed concerns from Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who asked Texas Attorney General John Cornyn whether the prayers would be extended to the classrooms. Cornyn said they would not because the football games were simply an extracurricular activity, and the school district already had a policy that prevented classroom prayer.
Time to do our daily Red Sox prayer with the Reverend Bob Tilton.
But Griffin said the football field could be an extension of the classroom because, quote, "it teaches leadership," he said. Well, it's also an extension of the classroom because who pays for the game?
Well, yeah, I mean,
yeah, I mean,
that's the issue.
To maintain that stadium, you know, run the lights, run whatever else it takes to be run, that comes from the funds given to the athletic department's budget, which comes from taxpayers.
Even more importantly, these students on the team are compelled to be there, and will get in serious trouble if they don't show up. And
well, what a name for a lawyer for the religious right, seculo.
Seculous.
Griffin wrapped up his case by stressing what he said throughout his 30-minute presentation. Quote, "This court has said freedom of speech and religious rights are not subject to a vote," he said. The court's decision is due in late June. Yeah, of course, you know, seculo is, well, first off, he is in the pocket of the religious right. I mean, he works for Pat Robertson.
Right.
So the idea, but once again, they're trying to sell this as simply a First Amendment free speech issue, and it isn't, because clearly, you know, if one of us wanted to get up in front of that mic and say, you know, "Oh, by the way, God doesn't exist, religion is hooey, and praying is a lot of hot air, now let's play ball," you know, they wouldn't let us do it.
We had a caller who a few weeks ago who said, you know, "Whoa, they're praying, or they voted for this prayer, so it must be legal." And we said, what would happen if we got up there and said, religion is stupid?
Well, that would be offensive.
He goes, that would be offensive. And that's exactly the attitude.
Yeah.
It is considered, the school board, of course, would step in and say, well, that will offend a bunch of people. So what's happening here is a majority attitude that religion is a right and proper thing is ramrodding its way through the school to impose itself on individuals.
And that's
this idea that having kids make the decision is a circuit breaker. No. It's against the Constitution, even if it's children voting to impose their majority religious opinion on others. It may no longer then be a government school prayer issue. It might just be some other majority, violating the civil rights of the people that they have in a captive audience.
Yeah.
But it's wrong one way or the other.
And as I pointed out, I'm showing a couple weeks ago, sure, we live in a country that is a democracy in which we vote on things, fine. But everything is not subject to a vote.
Right.
Just because we vote on some things. When the law of the land is clear on something, it's clear on something. If the students had gotten together before the game and decided that they all wanted to do a rail of Coke,
right?
Okay, before
or have slavery back.
Yeah, it's not like the nation's drug laws are temporarily suspended just because they took a vote. Okay, the law of the land is clear on certain things.
Right.
What's interesting is that also it's very common now for Christians to make the claim that they are being persecuted by the majority. The secular majority out there is voting their religious lifestyle to oblivion, when in fact their religious lifestyle is marginalized in the political arena by the Constitution. That is the design of the Constitution, is to separate the religion from the political apparatus of the country.
It always just amazes me how, for example, the 700 Club will have entire episodes that are just nothing but gay bashing, or Wiccan bashing, or whatever, whoever they want to bash that week. But then they'll get on and they will whine and snivel about anti-Christian bigotry and what they have to suffer, and so there's, so whatever.
I wanted to comment on one other thing from your news story.
You go right
the
ahead.
argument that, there's no guarantee that it'll be a prayer every time, and therefore it's balanced. Hey, if the school board was empowered to decide whether or not to have a prayer at the football games themselves, instead of turning to the students, there would still be no guarantee that the school board would vote to have a prayer every time. The lack of a guarantee that it won't happen every time is not the issue. The issue is, can they ever do it? Is it ever right? And the answer is no. It's not ever right.
So there is this issue of viewpoint neutrality, which is actually another Supreme Court case just recently, which had to do with whether student fees at universities can be distributed among groups that have positions that are politically objectionable to those who pay some of the fees. So, for example, if I was a member of this 700 Club and my student fees were going to the Gay Lesbian Alliance, I would think that that's wrong, and the Supreme Court says no, that's okay as long as there's viewpoint neutrality across the whole thing, meaning that all student groups are funded. And this is sort of the argument you see is creeping up in this case.
Right.
Can you do it in a global viewpoint neutral context, which would mean, I think, that the only possible way of getting close to that, despite your argument that it's illegal all the time because you have a captive audience who's listening to a prayer, but despite that obvious fact, if you were the school board and you scheduled, we're going to have some Christians today and some Hindus tomorrow and some Muslims in this day, you could almost call that an educational experience and cultural exposure.
Right.
But would they ramrod a slot for atheists?
In fact,
I don't know.
There are schools, I heard about this in California, there are schools that have representatives of religions come in and describe their religions to the students, what they do is they rotate so that an atheist gets his turn.
Right. So but there's clearly no objection to the study of comparative religious philosophy in school in the context of comparative religion. That's really not what's happening here. This is a genuine participation in a ritual of a religion.
This is a pure attempt at proselytization, and specifically, the phrase you used, ramrodding. It shows the extent to which the fundamentalists will go. If they can't persuade people to join their religion through appropriate forms of argumentation, or persuasion, then they'll just demand that you believe. And in fact, we have that going on now in the fine state of Oklahoma. Boy, oh boy. Oklahoma legislators are inviting a lawsuit if they pass a bill requiring religious language in science textbooks. Americans United for Separation of Church and State has warned. The Oklahoma State House unanimously passed a bill yesterday, this would have been the 5th, requiring the state's public schools to use science textbooks that acknowledge, quote, one God as the creator of human life in the universe. Well, this legislation is outrageous and unconstitutional, said the Reverend Barry W. Lynn, Executive Director of Americans United. This is America, not Iran. Our legislators are not supposed to be judges of religious truth. The Constitution requires public schools to be neutral on religious matters, continued Lynn, an attorney and a minister. Forcing science books to acknowledge God as the creator is a far cry from neutrality. So, of course, this is clearly something that not all Christians support. Once again, it's those ultra-fundamentalists. So they're like, oh, okay, well, I can't persuade you to believe in my God. Well, then here. That's... Oklahoma entered the national evolution controversy in November when the state's textbook committee voted to add anti-evolution disclaimers to public school biology textbooks. Earlier this year, however, Oklahoma Attorney General Drew Edmondson issued an opinion that the committee lacked the authority to alter text with disclaimers of any kind. In response to the controversy, members of the Oklahoma legislature introduced a bill creating specific qualifications for members of the textbook committee. Yesterday, must be a religious fanatic, that's probably at the time. Yesterday, the House added 2 amendments. One gives the committee the authority to insert, quote, a one-page summary, opinion, or disclaimer into all textbooks. The other mandates that science textbooks acknowledge God as the creator of life. So, that's...
But in a larger sense, this trial will settle the age-old question of science versus religion. As for science versus religion, I'm issuing a restraining order. Religion must stay 500 yards from science at all times.
You know what that's from? That's from the Simpsons.
Back in the USSA, I tell you. Anyway, I'm sorry, this is so you just don't know where to begin on how to respond to this.
I think unanimously.
Yeah.
Now, does unanimous mean like some people abstained? Or does it mean absolutely every single one of them voted and they all voted for it?
The word is unanimous here. You can take that with it.
That's so scary.
Quote, religious right groups and their allies have done everything possible to force their religious beliefs onto public schools, added Lynn. Now in states like Oklahoma, they're targeting public school science classes with their schemes. We must not allow our science classes to turn into Sunday school classes. At this point, the bill, SB 1139, will go to a conference committee where legislatures will work out differences between the House version with the controversial amendments and the Senate version. The conference committee should have no question about what will happen if this bill becomes law, Lynn concluded. Americans United will not hesitate to file suit, and I am confident that the courts would strike down this patently unconstitutional effort. It would get struck down if it have to, even at the Supreme Court. Oklahoma joins... I'm sorry,
never know it was an election year, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you would never... Oklahoma joins a plethora of other states that have fought over the evolution issue in recent months, including state legislatures and boards of education in Alabama, Arizona, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, New Mexico, and Ohio. Most of those in the South, curiously enough. Americans United is a religious liberty watchdog group based in Washington, D.C. Founded in 1947, the organization represents 60,000 members and allied houses of worship in all 50 states. Incredible.
We have some calls on the line. Why don't we take a few?
Yeah, we've got a couple here, so let's start.
Let's go to Russell.
Good morning.
Morning, Russell.
I just wanted to back to what you were saying earlier about how it might be educational if students would hear from different viewpoints. I just wanted to let you know that that is a reality in Los Alamos High School, New Mexico, where I went. They started a humanities class the year I graduated, and they actually bring in different speakers every week. And my father is the token atheist speaker every year.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's perfectly okay, as long as all significant viewpoints, boy, and I hate even using that word, because, obviously, it would be, if there's some lunatic living off in a cave somewhere, with his own religion, you don't bother trying to get him in. But all the major views on these things, as long as they're all represented, that's okay. That is neutrality.
That is a really interesting point. I mean, when you really sit down and talk with religious people, you kind of realize that every single person has their own religion. very, very rarely do you find two people who are in complete agreement.
Oh yeah, I very rarely find even two Christians who will.
But I should find out whether or not atheists are brought into comparative religion classes countrywide. I think that'd be really interesting. I doubt that they are.
It's probably kind of rare, but they do have a pretty wide spectrum. They bring in, fundamentalists and Catholics and Orthodox Jews and Unitarians. Oh, and one last thing. Martin, I hate to be picky, but the judge's name is Souter.
Souter?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I've said Souter, and I've heard it in the past as I've heard it in the past as Souter, and I guess it's one of those names where
Thank you
people
for the correction.
make a mistake. So I appreciate that.
See you guys.
Okay, take care.
Bye, Russell.
Yeah, another interesting thing about the story, very quickly, is that there are many, many mainstream religious people who are deeply offended at this kind of activity.
Oh, absolutely.
And we as atheists should be very, very careful to recognize the difference between these groups. There's a lot of people who want to keep church and state separated, and there are a lot of people who are very shocked at fundamentalism in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to get another short one?
Yeah, I just have another quick one, since we always try to touch on some science news on the show. Crawling out of the sea. Researchers say they have missing link. And you sent me this one, Jeff. Thank you very much. The remains of a creepy crawly fish that lived, I don't know if...
That's a scientific term.
Yeah, a scientific, or even a journalistic
Creepiest,
term.
Crawliest.
Yes. That's like the Roadrunner cartoon. The remains of a fish that lived 370 million years ago could hold the answer as to how we got here. Dr. Per Ahlberg looked at thousands of bones in hundreds of collections before he found two unusual pieces deep in the bowels of a Latvian museum, tucked away in a drawer. Yeah, I'm really concerned about the writing on this.
Go ahead.
We have creepy crawly and bowels so far.
Go ahead.
Anyway, but it's a good...
make it interesting to people that don't have any grasp of science at all.
That's very true. It's a good article. The discovery of the bone pieces, one from Latvia, the other from Estonia, made his heart beat faster when he realized what he was holding. It took me about a minute from taking one of those bones in my hand to realizing that this was what I had been searching for all this time, the missing link, said Ahlberg, who works at the Natural History Museum in London. What he was holding, he is convinced, was the remains of the first fish to crawl out of the water and establish itself on land, the common ancestor of all 25,000 species of land-based creatures. Now,
it's a little dripping water sound.
Can't you guys wait until after the show? Now, I hope that what they mean here by the first fish to crawl out of the water was the first species of... I find it difficult
not the
to
very actual
the very actual first fish. Yes, Sue Masterman must be an intern or something. Anyway, this fossil shows just about a perfect... Stop that! Or at least flush or something. This fossil shows just about a perfect intermediate condition between fish and amphibian, Ahlberg said. Ahlberg and the rest of the paleontology world have long known that such a creature had existed. There had to be something between the fish Panderichthys, which lived in water 375 million years ago, and the four-limbed, eight-toed Acanthostega, which lived on, as tired as I am, I'm impressed that I said that, which lived on land 365 million years ago, he said. This is it. The beast resembled a 4-foot crocodile, the scientists said. Instead of legs, it had 4 stubby fins with which it could walk on land, and a long tail fin to enable it to swim. It also had a nasty set of teeth. Like a crocodile, it probably hunted in the shallows with only its eyes above the water, but it was better equipped for a rush onto land to grab its prey. Ahlberg and his 2 fellow researchers have named the beast Livonia multidentato. That's a lion, Arlo. Come on. Because of its unprecedented 5 rows of teeth on its lower jaw. Livonia is the ancient name for the region where the fossil jaw was found. Their findings will be published this summer in the journal Paleontology. Yeah. But before the family tree of Homo sapiens, all of us humans, is established, however, there is still plenty of work to do. Now that genetic research has established that the Neanderthal species is no ancestor of ours, the hunt is on for that other missing link between mankind and the monkeys. And I think it bears mentioning that there are, of course, a lot of scientists who don't accept just the concept of the missing link. The process of evolution is so gradual that the idea that there's just one species out there that we haven't found that would put the jigsaw puzzle together, I think, is a bit of a fallacy.
And I hate to be picky.
Yeah.
But if these are the first creatures that came out of water and walked around on land, and their legs are good to help them dart out of the water and grab their prey. What prey?
Good point.
Let's go to Paul. Hi, Paul. Thanks for hanging on the line so long.
Good morning. I thought the creepy crawly was the thing that cleaned my pool.
Okay.
Might be. Yeah, check it for legs.
All right. Maybe it'll crawl out of my pool and clean the rest of my yard. But anyway, on the website, I'm doing your all's webcast.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing a little different format this week because we're based, since you guys are just basically talking heads, right?
Well,
I mean, there's not much.
There's
going
more
on.
of us to us in that, but
Yeah. Anyway,
Yes.
Anyway, what we're doing is we're sending a slide every 30 seconds to the www.spring.net webpage,
yeah.
and then we're just putting out the sound this week. We're not putting out like a full
Streaming
motion
video.
picture because there really isn't a whole lot of motion
Okay.
on your show. So this way we can
sorry.
stretch out the bandwidth so more folks can
I can dance.
listen to it.
Hey,
because we're
just
not
out of
putting out-
curiosity, do you keep track of the number of hits on that while our show is on?
There's a log in there somewhere. I haven't been looking at it, but I could start looking at it.
We'd be curious to know.
Yeah.
Because we have yet to
Forget it.
receive our first confirmed long-distance call from somebody watching from far away.
Well, Joseph
and what you're going to
well,
discover.
that doesn't count.
what
Joe
you-
would call us
What
anyway.
you're going to discover is like everything to do with the internet. It's hyper exaggerated,
Right.
and this rush to get TV shows simulcasted. This is of the Alex Jones kind of attitude. Like, if we can just get on the net, the whole world will suddenly believe everything we say.
I would be thrilled if we had a dozen people watching us
Right,
from far away.
right.
I'd be absolutely thrilled.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that you're understanding this is much more realistic than the Patriots who float around Austin. But
I'll look at the stats and get back to you next week.
Thanks,
and
we'd appreciate
give you like the real scoop on exactly how many people are watching. Yeah,
Okay.
how many millions of people are watching, right?
because you're doing an awful lot of work for two people, you know.
Yeah. That's all right. We appreciate
I'll
it.
let you know how many millions are tuning in, okay?
There we go.
Go
Yeah.
ahead and write those figures for us, will you?
Okay.
All right, thanks for calling.
Thanks.
Take care, Paul. That's fun.
What else you got?
Well, just this one brief piece that I was going to, but I was going to hold this up first, though, because this is the new issue of Free Inquiry. Actually, it's Jeff's copy, but I might have to steal it. Highly recommended, if you can find it.
Well, but, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Be careful the way you say things like
oh
that.
yeah, I'm just,
We
Yeah.
do not endorse products.
that's right, we don't. We just saying, highly recommended. Just a brief piece here that was very amusing. Modern day worshippers of the ancient Greek gods. I didn't know there were any.
Yeah.
Apparently there are. This took place in Greece. Modern day worshippers of the ancient Greek gods have had a row with the followers of one of those younger gods, Jesus. Seems that the Christians wanted to have a millennium celebration in the 2,500-year-old Parthenon, but this proposal insulted the adherents of Zeus et al. The Parthenon, temple to Athena, is a sacred place of Greek religion, said Nikolaos Siotis, secretary of the Committee for Recognition of the Greek Religion of the 12 Gods. Quote, "It is the greatest blasphemy for songs of another religion to be heard there, and we will not allow it." The celebration went ahead anyway,
Of course.
bringing in much needed revenue to the city
Of
of
course,
Athens.
because when have Christians ever
Yeah.
taken the rights of other religions seriously?
Well, never, but I think even I was surprised to see that we have Zeus worshippers still alive today. That's
Yeah,
good. Interesting. But it's fascinating. Remember
that guy living in a cave with his.
Yeah,
with
but
his-
now remember, this is the same country where they are like trying to lynch that novelist.
Right.
You know, so all the Christians are infuriated by this novelist who has written a novel speculating on Jesus in a similar manner to The Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah.
And so apparently there are like riots in the streets about that. So,
Wow.
so and in the midst of this, there are Zeus worshippers going, hey.
Well, I've got some announcements.
All right.
And let me just quickly do a couple of these, and we'll get to more
Okay.
calls. Please, if you're on the line, hold on. We will get to you very shortly. On Thursday, April 13, at 12:30 p.m., the University of Texas Law School Federalist Society will present a forum that will focus on the Doe versus Santa Fe ISD near Houston case from Texas that is being argued this week before the U.S. Supreme Court. In this suit, several parents challenged the traditional student-initiated prayer presented before high school football games in Santa Fe. This debate will feature two leading authorities and litigators on each side of this interesting legal and social issue. Alan Parker, president of the San Antonio-based Texas Justice Foundation and former St. Mary's Law School professor, will defend the right of students to pray in school. On the other side, Jay Jacobson, head of the Austin American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, will argue for a strict separation of church and state. The forum is free and open to all students and the public. There will be a question and answer session and complimentary pizza and soft drinks.
Woohoo!
This program will be held in room 2.139 at the University of Texas Law School, which is located on 26th and San Jacinto. That is, again, Thursday, April the 13th at 12:30 at room 2.139 of the University of Texas Law School on 26th and San Jacinto.
All right.
That's very interesting, with the free pizza and soft drinks. And we are being asked to go to line 2. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, hi. Hey, I was just going to ask if you guys maybe had a chance to see they have the show called Defending the Faith or whatever.
We're familiar with the existence of that show. I think Arlo watches it occasionally.
Yeah, I'm
well, it's really ridiculous. But they were on there yesterday, and they seem to be on quite a bit. I don't know if they have jobs or what, but they spend a lot of time on there. But yesterday they had a big poster there, and they particularly singled out atheists and sort of attacked what atheists are all about.
Oh, what a surprise.
They had a whole list of all these different, I can't remember anything in particular, but I just was curious if anyone...
We eat babies and whatever. I rarely take that sort of thing seriously. It's, you know...
Yeah.
It's, I mean, we'll occasionally we'll get, like, the fundies will call us up and just, you know, call us a nasty name or something, and we just, you know, I just say the more that they're just doing our job for us, you know, making themselves look stupid and bad and kind of mean-spirited, and you know, that's not what we want to do. So
yeah, it's not at all shocking to hear about them bad-mouthing atheists on their show. I mean, that's what they believe. Of course, that's what they'll say.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Big surprise.
Mainly, I was curious: does all that take place at the same studio? Do all the I mean, do y'all ever, like, run across each other? Or?
I assume that it does, but I'm not absolutely certain. We've never seen them around here.
Oh, really? I thought that you must have, because it seems like they're on every day. They have 2 or 3 shows, it seems like. It's so weird. They're always, like, either out on the campus of UT or...
Remember, they're all at church today, so...
They do have reruns also that I've seen.
yeah, they probably will, like, do a weekly, like, a new episode, and then but also be playing tapes of earlier episodes.
I see.
That could be what they're doing. I don't know.
Well, I was curious if you all were familiar with them, or
We know they exist.
Run into them.
Yeah.
But yesterday, in particular, I was really offended because they had a huge poster up, and they had all these different reasons why atheists were wrong and how they should come to their faith, or I don't know what they were talking about. But I didn't watch much of it, of course, because it's pretty ridiculous. But I was kind of offended that they had this sort of like a hate board up there of why, you know, we should hate atheists and why.
You know, if you're an intellectual, you'll probably end up in hell for it.
But,
yeah, that's what...
They didn't say, here's why we should hate atheists.
Well, no, not in so many words, but it was pretty much, you know, well, you can imagine.
That was the gist
they
of it.
say why they think we're wrong, and we say why we think they're wrong, and the viewing audience can make their informed decision.
It's a big mistake to be offended by that.
I know it is, and I should have, you know, turned it off sooner. Is what I should have done. But
and I would just like to point out,
will catch your eye whenever you see, you know, atheists up there in big.
I just want to point out that again to our viewers, while we try to be fair in presenting our understanding of what Christians believe, the right place to find out what Christians believe is from Christians. Go ask them, you know, what do you think about X? Okay,
now
and ask them very seriously, and be careful that they don't, like, you know, take one point of view in response to one question and a contradictory point of view in response to another question, but they're the ones that really understand what they believe.
Now, this is also what separates the Christians from what I would consider the typical mainstream definition of a cult. When you ask the Christians what they believe, they will tell you the whole dead man on a stick story right there. and they lay it all out. But if you ask a Scientologist what they believe,
right, they will not talk about Xenu and being evolved from clams and all that stuff.
You don't hear the story up front. You have to join, and then you hear the story. So that element of...
I have to join and shell out thousands of dollars.
That fundamental element of deception is the difference between... And that's why you can do what Jeff says. You can ask them, and they'll tell you the whole silly myth. But you cannot ask a Scientologist for the whole silly myth because you have to go through the appropriate steps of indoctrination. In fact, L. Ron Hubbard made the claim that you could die. You could die if you got the information too quickly, too fast. So this deception is what protects them from being what I would consider, and what most people actually would consider, a cult.
But while they may be a cult, they may not be a cult by that definition. What they will do, and this is what I want to warn people about, is Christians do have a misunderstanding of what atheism is, like a serious misunderstanding and a strong emotional commitment to that particular misunderstanding. Okay, we argue with Christians. Christians try to tell us what it is we believe about stuff. Okay, we don't try to tell Christians what they believe. We will take their words at face value because that's plenty. Okay, we don't need to make up stuff about what's so wacky about Christianity, but they make up stuff about what atheists believe, and people need to keep that in mind.
They confuse the basic issue of belief versus non-belief, and they try to characterize atheism as this sort of competing religion to theirs that's like an anti-God religion. When it's not. I mean, atheism's not a religion. Atheism is probably most accurately described as a response to religion. And I'm feeding back pretty hardcore.
Oh, sorry, I had my mic up because I wanted to mention something there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think they do tell everything about their own beliefs. I mean, just read...
Man, we got major...
Well, mostly.
I mean, as a recommendation, I'd say read the Bible, too, if you want to find out what Christianity is about.
Well,
I completely lose touch with that book.
But Christians,
the point is it's available. It's the Bible, right? Yeah. It's absolutely available.
If you want to know what atheists believe, just ask us. We'll tell you. All right, thanks for your call.
Oh, let me ask one more thing.
Sure.
I know that you guys have talked about this before, but they seem to think that the burden of proof is on the atheists. They say,
sure.
We believe that in Christianity, and you can't prove it wrong. So we don't have to prove that. We don't have to prove that God exists. You have to prove that He doesn't exist.
If some guy walks up to you and says, I assert that an advanced alien civilization is living inside our sun, for example, right? Nobody has any obligation to believe that person until he makes with the evidence.
Exactly.
Okay? That is exactly what's going on with Christianity. They believe what they believe, and nobody has any obligation to agree with them until they make with the evidence. Period.
Yeah,
exactly. That was just one of the points that.
That's one of the ways they. That's one of the ways they misrepresent atheism.
Right.
We do not assert that nothing that could possibly be called a god could possibly exist. That is not what atheism is. Atheism is we just don't happen to believe in any of them because we don't see any evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for your call.
Okay. Good job.
Well, the feedback stopped. I thought we'd lost you.
The recurrent axiom is, whoever makes the claim bears the burden of proof. And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Farmer Bob may be a pillar of the community and a really nice guy, but, if he comes to me and he says, a UFO landed in my pasture yesterday and mutilated my daughters and got my cows pregnant, it's going to take a lot more than just his word for it. For me to believe that, as nice a guy as he may be, okay? That's an extraordinary claim requires extraordinary evidence. I don't have to prove to him that his UFO didn't land.
Right. Another thing that Christians love to do is try to make us into like their direct opponents by saying that we never ever talk about any religions other than theirs, and that's just not true. And Rohan, you've got some stuff here for us today about what's happening with some Buddhists.
Well, yes, the basic idea is that there are plenty of religions out there, and they all, without exception, have fundamental logical flaws and internal inconsistencies. And there is this temptation for Americans, especially today, to think that, well, that's true of everybody except those wonderful East Eastern mystics, and especially the most popular among them today are the Tibetan Buddhists. And the Tibetan Buddhists have a very interesting and important claim that is in fact true, which is that their country is an occupied land by a politically nasty regime, which is what we consider the People's Republic of China. However, this doesn't make the religion any more legitimate or any more correct. And the way the place operated before the Chinese came was it was basically a theocratic feudalist society where everybody worked really hard so that a bunch of bald-headed people can sit around and chant and meditate and make all kinds of claims regarding their particular vision of the universe. But the most interesting aspect of this right now is that in Austin, a very popular and large group of Tibetan Buddhists call themselves the Diamond Way Buddhists, and they are followers of one particular sect, one particular portion of the great Tibetan Buddhist religion, and that's called the Karma Kagyu lineage. And the key here is that the lineage is led by a man who is the reincarnation of the guy who just died and was leading it before. So when a guy who runs this thing dies, they do a search and they try to find out which little kid out there is his reincarnation. Then they take that kid, train him, and make that kid the next leader of the lineage. Well, as you can imagine, is what has happened lately with the diaspora out of Tibet. The Dalai Lama has fled Tibet, and a lot of the other major religious figures of Tibetan Buddhism have fled Tibet to India and now all over the world. The Karma Kagyu lineage has this problem that there are two people claiming to be the leader of the sect. Two people who have been anointed as the official reincarnation of the last leader who is now dead. And there are two boys, they're both about the same age, and the issue surrounds this there's a lot of very important issues here. The most interesting is that there's a very expensive crown that this particular leader wears. It's a black crown, and it's very valuable, and this particular crown is owned basically by the kid who is the official version of the reincarnation. Mm-hmm. There's also a very expensive temple in India that is run by this particular leader of the sect. So who actually is this leader is very key. Also is the issue of the relationship with China and India, the politics of the situation, which is very, very delicate. And this has to be handled carefully. So there are all kinds of accusations, but the bottom line, and since we started this discussion a little late, I won't go through all the details, but the bottom line is that the child that lives now that has been recognized by the Diamond Way is not the one that has been recognized by the Dalai Lama. And so there's the accusation that the Dalai Lama is trying to take over a section of the Tibetan Buddhist sect. And the Dalai Lama is sort of like the first among equals as far as these lamas go. He's not the principal lama like the Pope.
Yeah.
He's like the Pope was before the split between Orthodox Christianity and Catholicism, where the Pope was sort of the first among all the patriarchs, but not the boss. And so this issue is still very hot and heavy going on. And then the Diamond Way people are actually making the claim that China, who supports one of the two boys, by the way, the same one the Dalai Lama supports, ironically, very strange, let the kid escape in order to cause a split and to cause the exiled Tibetan Buddhists to fragment, thereby reducing the political pressure on China to suppress Tibet. So this is essentially the essence of Tibetan Buddhism, this great movement that the Dalai Lama has been bringing to the American people through actors and various people who are pushing the beauty of Tibetan Buddhist medicine and Tibetan Buddhist philosophy and writing all these wonderful books. But it's still loaded with the same garbage that any power structure that comes together in any kind of bureaucracy that comes together gets bloated with its own power and intrigues. And this is key. I mean, there are two people right now claiming to be the incarnation of one person. Somebody is wrong, at least. Well, certainly both of them are wrong. Let me make it clear. They're both wrong.
Yeah, nobody's both be right,
but they can't both be right. And the denial of this has been kept hidden from the American public. The American public doesn't hear about this and about the Dalai Lama's intrigue in this sense, but it's very, very troubling. And I just wanted to present that to make the claim that This isn't, Christianity is not the only thing. It's the most interesting thing because it's what we're sort of immersed up to our necks in. But this is up-and-coming information as well about other religions that have their own fatal flaws.
We just lost a whole bunch of callers there. Folks, please call back. We're trying. We got a bunch of news and announcements and things. We're trying to get all the callers. If you stay on the line, we will get to you. Let's go now to Pat on 3. Hi, Pat.
Hey.
Hi.
You guys don't know how good you sound. I just got back into Austin, and I got out of the hospital. And they said, was going either way, at one time. I was going out of there. And now I'm better now.
Good.
And but what I want to call in about is the experience up there and the old myth I've heard about there are no, what do they say, there are no
atheists in foxholes?
Atheists in the foxhole. Yeah, excuse me, this medicine still has me where I'm not doing things too well. But I've heard that old myth, all my life. And even, when I got back in Vietnam, I'd hear that, and it wasn't true. And while I was there, I had the experience that I knew, I was pretty much, could go either way.
Right.
And some nights I thought I was losing it. And I never had any inclination, to fall down and beg some supernatural being to come in and intercede and pull me out of it. And I never had any inclination to ask anybody to go pray for me either. Whenever they come in and tell me they prayed for me, I just thank you for your thoughts.
Yeah.
And now probably because my wife, she respects my views and everything, and has some that I do, and she probably kept them out of my room. I never had any any preachers or anything in there. Even though I was in ICU, and they normally come in there.
Yeah.
And the only religious thing that happened in my room is my fanatic far-right sister-in-law brought in a balloon that says "God loves you" on it.
Yeah, that's
and nice. That just, if I would have done something like that to her, her brother would still be, my brother would still be beating on me,
Yeah. She doesn't realize how appropriate that imagery is. It's a big inflated balloon.
Right.
Yeah, full of hot air.
I never thought about that, but you're right. But I just want to call in and give you that thought there that you don't change over. I've known too many people that were atheists and they didn't change over at the last minute.
Yeah.
Their relatives are what changes over at the last minute and say they did and this sort of thing.
That religion would just love to believe that it's somehow indispensable to humanity, that absolutely everybody needs it, and that's just not true.
Yeah. Oh yes, now I did.
You're here to hand people a pin.
I did have some of my far-off relatives that couldn't get there call in and send letters and cards and things in. And some of them are very explicitly religious. And the funny thing about that is several of them sort of indicate in the thing that not just their combined prayers were what pulled me out of it, but their particular prayer.
Oh yeah, they're taking credit. They're taking credit. This is
the credit.
Very, very common, not only in just religious fanaticism, but alternative medicine, which is also a religion, has the same thing going for it. You'll spend years in chemotherapy. You'll have hundreds of very, very trained medical professionals attend to you for 3 years of illness, and then some, Aztec wonder weed gets the credit for healing you.
Right.
It's absolutely crazy.
Right.
Absolutely crazy.
And also, $10,000 medical bill had nothing to do with it.
Right. And
get that to save my money. Yeah.
I've also been in communication with at least one former buddy of mine in the military who, after I left, ended up in Bosnia for a little while. And he came back and said, I used to be relatively neutral about the existence of God, but now I know there is nobody out there watching over us.
Yeah.
And so the foxhole actually, I think, produces more atheists, as you said. A lot of guys
there is a God. What the heck am I doing here?
A lot of guys watching people from Vietnam saying to themselves, well, some guys came home saying, well, God kept me alive, although he smited all of those other people.
Right.
But a lot of them came home saying, no, my dice came up, came up 7, and his came up snake eyes, and that's the way it is.
Besides, what is the attitude behind that little saying? I mean, even if it was true
better than
that the terror of being in a foxhole under enemy fire drives everybody to become a believer. Even if that were true, what would that mean? It would mean that people are being frightened into believing in something for which they really don't have any evidence.
Right.
And fear is not a valid basis for belief. It's not evidence of anything actually being true. It's only evidence that you're afraid.
Right. Right.
Well, phew.
Boy.
Thanks for your call.
Yeah.
And we're glad to hear you're doing better.
Yeah, we're glad you're out of the hospital.
Just hang in there and
if you
listen to your doctors, and
we won't pray for you.
And if you feel up to it, you can come to the bagel shop today at 10:30 and meet some of us.
Well, I won't be able to make it today, but probably next week.
All right.
Standing invitation.
Well, we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for your call.
Yeah, what's interesting, you hear situations about, let's say a plane will crash, right, and 300 people will get killed, but one person will survive.
Right, that's a miracle.
And the survivor of that survivor's family would be like, it's a miracle. Yeah. But the media never goes and interviews the survivors of the 300 dead people,
right?
To see what they think about this supposed miracle. So it's all about Daddy likes me best. That's what it's about.
Another quick announcement. Religion, Humanism, and Science in the 21st Century Conference on April 15 and 16 at Braeswood Hotel and Convention Center in Houston. You are invited to explore these important issues with us in a 2-day conference featuring several workshops, speakers, and a banquet. This event is open to all humanists, freethinkers, atheists, agnostics, and adherents of all religions. I'll just quickly go through the workshops. This is sponsored by the Houstonians for Secular Humanism, as I understand it. They have these workshops: Evolution, Astrobiology, and the Origins of Life, the Cultural and Technological Evolution, Artificial Intelligence, The Future of Woman, Intergroup Workshop, Banquet with the keynote speaker Paul Kurtz, noted philosopher and head of the Council for Secular Humanism, publishers of Free Inquiry magazine. That's all on Saturday the 15th. On Sunday the 16th, they have The Future of Religion and Humanism, Y2K, Year of Crisis for Church-State Separation. For more information, contact coordinator Robert Finch at 281-491-1608 or email rdfinch@flash.net. And if you missed that, you can call our voicemail
and that's next weekend.
Put the voicemail up. Yeah, voicemail line is 371-2911. If you didn't catch that, just call the voicemail, leave a message, and we will get the information together for you and get back to you. Let's take another call.
Yeah, let's.
Steve.
Hi.
Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Anyway, I'm just calling in response to one of your previous callers, the one who watched the Defenders of the Faith show yesterday. I also saw that. In any case, you covered some of the points I was going to make, so I'll be brief.
Okay.
But basically, they had several charts, like the other caller said, and they defined certain relevant terms like atheism and religion and so on. And he starts by trying to define atheism as being a religion, like any other religion.
Sure.
And then he proceeds to debunk religion in exactly the same way that atheists would do the reverse. No, I think I said that wrong. He attempts to debunk atheism exactly as atheists would debunk religion.
Right, by saying it's an assertion that can't be proven?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
By in making it seem as if atheism is a positive statement, which in fact you of course pointed out that it isn't. And then of course he makes many blanket statements about atheists in general, and it's really easy to portray any group as being kind of schizophrenic if you assume that it's a single coherent group, but of course most groups aren't.
Right.
So
yeah.
It's interesting. There's the professor of who's in charge of the religious studies at the University of Texas also holds this opinion, or at least he did a couple years ago when I first spoke to him, which was that atheism is a perfectly fine religion, and it didn't strike me as being a crazy thing back then, but now of course I really object to that characterization. Because for all the reasons you said, it just logically cannot be assembled as a religious statement. But it is a very, very commonly held position, even among people who you might think are religious intellectuals in a sense.
There are, however, atheists who approach their atheism with the trappings of religion. There's the North Texas Church of Free Thought, and now there's, I think, other churches of free thought have popped up in California and in Houston. What they do is they recognize the social function served by a church organization, and so they have adopted that, but they still don't say that they're taking the non-existence of God on faith. What they are doing, the closest thing to a religious belief that they have is they strongly embrace rationalism, and then they organize that belief into a church-like kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess it's their way of creating a social atmosphere for themselves.
Yeah, which is an interesting experiment, and we'll see how it turns out.
It might even be politically expedient to get acknowledged as a religion, as some wacky religions just do very much to get tax.
Well, I'd love to be tax exempt, but I don't think it's going to happen.
And if you want to be represented along with all the religions, maybe you need to be somehow politically identified as a religion yourself. So there may be this sort of schizophrenic nature to it. Yeah.
Actually, it's kind of interesting. This show inspired me to look up a lot of the relevant terms in a dictionary. And yeah, atheism has a very short definition. It's definitely not a positive claim. I mean, of course, you guys know that.
It depends. It does depend what dictionary you look in, because there are a wide variety of different spins on that, depending on what dictionary you look in. There are dictionaries that pretty much take the stance that atheism is the assertion that there is no God, and that's unfortunate. But with the vast majority of people in our country being Christians and wanting to believe because it's expedient for them to believe that we are making a positive claim, it's no big surprise that some of the dictionaries reflect that.
Okay, the one I looked in happened to say that it was a disbelief in gods or gods.
Yeah.
Which
well,
is,
that's close. Christians will bend over backwards to interpret disbelief as as
a belief.
Yeah, you believe it's not, so it's a belief.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to do the funny voice. Okay.
No, I always do the voice. I like the voice.
Offensive.
Thanks for your call.
Sure.
All right, bye-bye.
Once again, it's most appropriate to say atheism is a response to religion. It's not a competing religion. It's not some sort of anti-religion. It's a response to religion.
Yeah,
a religion makes a claim, this deity exists. The atheist says, considering the lack of evidence for this claim, I choose not to believe in this deity that you claim exists. That's what atheism is.
Yeah.
All it is.
Go
ahead.
I'll clarify. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
We completely made you lose your thought.
I do want to point out that there are God claims which can be said to be false on a logical basis. If you have, for example, a God who is supposed to be omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent, and yet there is evil, or anything that you want to call bad things, if you agree to the existence of bad things in the world, that God can't possibly exist. Because if he can't get rid of the bad things, he's not omnipotent. If he doesn't know about the bad things, he's not omniscient. And if he doesn't care about the bad things, he's not omnibenevolent.
Yeah.
So there are assertions like that which can be made. If that's your definition of God, that doesn't exist. That is not the same as saying nothing you could possibly call a God exists. If you want to show us some South Seas Islanders with a wooden totem pole that they worship and they say that's their God, sure. That God exists, there he is, it's that wooden totem pole.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course we could all die and find out that, Bongo Bongo, God of the Congo, was Big Boss all along. We have no idea, we're not utterly close to the possibility.
While we have
we're running. No, we're not running.
No, we got half an hour.
We got plenty of time. Let's take a bunch of calls.
Oh, this is an hour and a half show.
Yes.
Yeah, we got an hour and a half. A reminder, once again, everybody, we meet at the Hot Jumbo Bagel Shop at near the corner of 5th and Lavaca, right after the show at 10:30. Atheists and atheist-friendly viewers, come on down.
Yes.
Let's go to, I don't see
Tony, I think, line 4.
I need to see the sign.
Well, we might have a change
I'm going to Tony on line 4. Hi, Tony.
Okay, how you doing?
Just
Good.
fine,
How
sir.
are you, Tony?
I was calling to ask. Now, I went to a Catholic school back when I was young, and everything that they taught me in the Catholic school, I was always wondering, where are all the other different races of people at? They're not in that Bible.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh?
Are those were the only people here?
You know, there was no Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Koreans.
Okay, this is a really excellent point. Not the particular point you're making, but this is the point I was about to get on a moment ago, but it's exactly the same essence. Atheists are hung up, and I think legitimately so, on the most basic problems, right? An atheist will look at the Bible and say exactly what you did. What about all the people who didn't get to know Jesus because they lived in Siberia or something? Right. And there are fundamental questions and fundamental problems that atheists have trouble with. Like, wait a minute, I'm still stuck on the fact, if I lose my arm in a battle and I go to heaven, is it waiting for me there? Yeah. Right? I mean, very basic things we want to know the answer to that we hear huge rationalizations for. And I'll just give you, since we do have a moment of time, there's an example in this issue about the Tibetan Buddhists. There are these two kids, remember I was telling you about? Well, there was a prediction a long time ago that the lineage will weaken between the death of the 16th guy and the 17th guy. And one of the things that they have to rationalize why there's no weakness, right? And the explanation is, of course, that the apparent inconsistency can readily be explained. The reincarnation of the 14th guy only lived for 3 years, and so he didn't really count as the 14th, so he was the 13th, and therefore the lineage is shifted by one, and therefore it's all consistent. So now the explanation to your question, what happened to the Japanese people? Well, go ahead, ask a Christian, what's the story? Where are all these missing people? And listen to explanations that sound like this, that sound like some kind of convoluted, twisted thing. Oh no, we're okay, we're holding together here. And yeah, no, atheists don't accept that. We find that as not evidence, as evidence of the fact that the whole philosophy is fundamentally weak.
There is a difference between rationalism
and
as a rational ways of thinking and rationalization, where you're basically making up excuses out of thin air to try to solve these unsolvable
to try
problems.
to patch holes in arguments.
When I was in the military, I heard a military chaplain say, answer an enlisted guy's question, why is there trouble between the Jews and the Arabs? And he came down to, these are two races that are descendant from two separate brothers from some old biblical story. And presumably, that's the case for everybody, right? Everybody's the descendant of some guy who was listed in this huge list of names in the Bible that went off somewhere, you know?
And I got another question.
Okay.
At the beginning, when they said that a virgin had gotten pregnant, there's no way a virgin can get pregnant.
Well, it's magic.
Unless it's a miracle.
You gotta have an egg, and you gotta have the sperm cells go into.
Well, we know that, and you know that.
I would think people would think that's common sense.
Yeah, it was a lot easier to swallow.
You know. And then I went. This guy asked me one time. He said, "Do I believe in God?" And I told him, "No, I'm an atheist." He said, "Oh, so you're a devil worshiper."
No, we don't believe in him either.
The other Christian God.
Yeah.
They go in hand, the God and the devil thing. You can't believe in one and not believe the other one.
Right.
Oh, angel, listen not to this child of Satan.
Yeah, there you go, right there.
Yeah.
That's what they tell me, that I'm a devil worshiper.
Yeah. See, they can't understand anything outside of their own little box.
Yeah.
And so, if you don't worship their God, then you have to worship the other Christian God.
Us and them. If you're not with us, you're against us.
Yeah.
If you don't believe in our good guy, you have to believe in our bad guy. It's nonsense.
That's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you for calling.
We
want
very
to
much.
remind you again of the Atheist Community of Austin's weekly meeting at the Bagel Shop.
I heard you just talking about that.
Come on down. We'd love to meet you.
It's a great venue.
Thank you.
Yeah, and anybody watching, I mean, if you consider yourself an unbeliever, if you feel like you're alone and you don't know anybody and your family members that you can't talk to and they can't relate to you, and you want to meet some other atheists and see what we're all about, come down to Hot Jumbo Bagelry. It's on 5th Street between... now
remember,
it's between Lavaca and Guadalupe.
The virgin birth question is actually a little bit of a different kind of issue, right? I mean, the basic stipulation, of course, is a supernaturalist birth, and you can challenge that it ever happened, but it's very complicated to go back historically and examine exactly what went on back then, And certainly this sounds like some hanky-panky and not some supernaturalist condition. However, that there are plenty of stories like that I shook me up when I heard them, like this lamp that burned for days and days and days and days. It's like, well, do I start debunking the actual burning of the lamp, or do I just say, look, the whole thing is a story? It's hard to choose. Now, there are some atheists who prefer to actually go back and do a historical debunking of the Bible. And there are those of us who say, the whole thing is a story. It doesn't need to be historically debunked. Or, there's a lot of ways of approaching the criticism, I think.
Yeah. I think it's important to keep in mind when you're talking about, lamps burning too long and virgins getting pregnant, that we're talking about a people, the culture this book came out of, who did not have science. They didn't know how a lot of things worked. All they knew was, well, it usually works this way. But if it worked that way, that would be like strange and unusual and neat. Right?
It was a miracle and it was gross.
So, what, guys? Yeah, we'll take another call. Relax. We know what we're doing. Okay, so let's go to Bobby on 3.
Hey, how you doing?
Just fine.
Good. How are you?
It is really a funny show, and I love to watch your show. It's really, really cool. And it's funny that atheists probably don't get organized, but this seems like a little bit of an organization. It's pretty cool.
We're working on it.
I was curious about what type of activities keeps your community together.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I've been doing announcements all day, sort of fitting them in where I could. There is a conference on religion, humanism, and science in the 21st century in California coming up in a couple of weeks. There is a conference happening in Houston next week. And let me take this opportunity to read the rest of my announcements. We're involved.
I really just wanted to talk with you for a little bit because I know you do the announcements as well.
All right.
I want to tell you about
it. But we do stuff together.
Cool.
Is what we do.
One of the most fun things I can think of as an atheist, like my Saturday afternoon fun to get a really good laugh, is to flip the channels from Alex Jones to TBN. And back and forth, and I just flip the channels back and forth and have a wonderful time.
Oh yeah, TBN is great.
I grew up in a Catholic school. I went to a seminary that was a Roman Catholic seminary. It was just like a rampant gay thing. Actually, it was really horrifying.
Yeah,
and I left college and came home because it was just crazy up there.
Not anything against gay people.
No, not at all. But it was like a little bit of a cover. It seemed like. Well, then I went into a fundamentalist movement, and then I went into like a Jew thing, and then I went and finally at 33, I think all of them are crazy. Every religion out there, and I've really given them I've sort of taken the Joseph Campbell approach, where you study different religions but you never commit to one. So I think it's hilarious to even think that this mysticism, just like the thing that you mentioned about the Buddha, the Buddhist thing. Does genetics not fit into that somewhere? I mean, if you think about it, each of these mystical little boys that come along, didn't they have to have like a father that destroyed a little bit of the lineage time after time after time? The whole virgin birth thing is just kind of goofy. And the other thing that's kind of offensive is when Christians grab the television set and say the Word of God. And they've got this Word of God thing. You know how many times the Bible has been chopped up, politically motivated?
It's been pureed.
Whipped and pureed in a blender.
And what's amazing is that you can still take it and run it through a Bible code program and get secret messages.
like Sammy Sosa's home run
by
record.
Divine inspiration.
Wasn't it during the winter solstice episode when the Christian called up and said that you can use the Bible code and actually find Sammy Sosa's home run record in the Bible?
Because that was so important to God back in the,
I mean, he was serious.
Because they're the only people who seem to pray anymore, right?
I'm sorry, caller, go ahead.
Well, that's just incredibly funny. I think of all the Bible characters that I kind of really like was Joseph. Because here's a guy who goes out for 6 months and comes back and his wife's pregnant. And he goes, well, that's cool. And she says, no, I wasn't screwing around on you. We're having a baby. Yeah. And he goes, well, that's okay with me.
No. Oh, yeah, honey, it's a miracle.
Right. But I think technically wasn't Joseph told by an angel that everything was okay here before...
Well, that's what the story says, you see.
Assuming that there was an historical Jesus at all, and assuming that, that Joseph and Mary had not, in fact, done it, Yeah, there are all kinds of other perfectly mundane explanations.
Well, remember, God takes many forms, and some of them are weird.
Well, the other,
Thank you, Joe
deal
Bob.
is the half of my family is Jehovah's. So you want to talk about a melting pot of religion? No wonder I'm so screwed up. But the Jehovah's are actually kind of cool because you gotta really respect people that believe there's only 144,000 people, going to heaven. Because in relation, that makes Jews look rather generous.
I'll tell you what, I really, really sympathize with you with family members who are Jehovah's Witnesses. I've seen extremely destructive situations, interpersonal situations caused by that utterly crackpot cult of a religion. And these guys are really bad. They are truly cultic, and it's very, very terrible.
Well, and they're remarkably very much similar to the Seventh-day Adventists, sort of a splinter of that took that Ellen G. White road, where masturbation was the course of all evil. That was the Ellen G. White thing. I watched a big program on that, and I really got an education on that. That's funny. The Christianity in the workplace also. I got driven out of a job. I mean, $140,000 a year job with a very large company here in Austin by a Jehovah's Witness and a Christian, because I don't have any religion at all, and I think they're all kind of funny. Mm-hmm. And I make no bones about this. Well, in the workplace, in a corporate workplace, when I was managing like 18 people, I had a Christian boss, a real hardline fundamentalist boss, and I had a Jehovah on my team. And believe it or not, these two people, because of they love their own religious debate, that they brought it to work with them. So when they brought it to work with them, they eventually kind of set up the non-Christian. And they kind of set me up in a bad situation. Now, I'm not going to tell you about it, but I will tell you that these two people set the plot to get rid of the non-believer. And they had respect for one another because they both had a God consciousness going on, this whole God thing going on. Right. And they would take work hour after hour and debate the sovereignty of God and, Jesus versus Jehovah, and they both loved it. In the middle of that, they ended up firing several people on my team. And I was wondering if you ever have any callers that have been driven from their own workplace, even, under the guise of Christianity.
Yeah, come down and talk to us about at the Bagelry. I'd love to hear the seminary story also.
Have you spoken? I don't know if there's anything that could be done, but have you spoken to an attorney about that? I mean, do you think that you were deliberately driven out of your job because you weren't a Christian?
Absolutely.
Okay, and you have spoken to an attorney?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, we're in Texas, so you can be fired because you're ugly.
Right. But anyway, but what did the attorney say?
The attorney said unless they actually came to you and said, we're firing you because you had non-religious beliefs. There's nothing you can do.
Right.
But,
it'd be hard for you to prove that that's how they do it.
There was a news story on the ACA email list, about a professor, I think, from Kansas, who has been driven out of his post because of his disagreement with the prevailing religious views of his university. But I don't have any of the details. I'll try to remember to bring that in next week.
But I remember he was like some 20 to 30
These stories do crop up.
Now, we have a professor on our campus, Dr. Robert Coons, who I believe is leveraging his authority as a sanctioned professor to promote his religious viewpoint. And I've never claimed or ever considered he'd be up for like some kind of 10-year review for his unethical practices. In the military, he would be. But still, I mean, the point is that we would never push people from their job because they're Christian, right? That would
if they can get the job done, they're qualified.
Oh, look at the back of a dollar bill. I mean, that runs the country.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Only since the 50s.
Right.
All right.
That is just really funny. But hey, thanks for taking the time to chat. Perhaps I'll come down to the Bagelry there.
All right.
Yeah, come meet us
sometime when it's convenient for you. We'd love to meet you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that story.
Thanks
for your call.
Have a great show.
See ya. Bye bye. I was about to say you too. Okay, let's go. We're just rolling on. Oh wait. I'm going to do my announcements.
Hang on, Kristen.
Kristen, we'll get you in a second, and we have Jenna on the line, too. Please stay on. We will get to everybody who's on the line. We've got time. We're going to be involved in the 13th Annual Walk for Safe Families and Safe Streets. That's starting in Waterloo Park on April 16. Call our voicemail again. Ray Blevins is the guy in our group who is organizing that, and we want to get a bunch of people together and generate a lot of money for that good cause. Also, on April 29, we're having our blood drive. More details can be gotten on the voicemail line. And finally, the anniversary international conference for the Council of Secular Humanism, entitled Imagine There's No Heaven, A Future Without Religion, will be taking place from May 4th to 7th at the Wyndham Hotel in Los Angeles, California. Speakers will include Dr. Taslima Nasrin, author, poet, champion of secularism and human rights, fierce critic of Islam, and exile from her native Bangladesh. Jared Diamond, UCLA professor of physiology, author, and one of the nation's most successful popularizers of science.
Cool.
Dr. Jill Tarter, leader of Project Phoenix, a privately funded SETI program that search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and inspiration for the lead character in Carl Sagan's book Contact and film Contact. Dr. Paul Kurtz, founder of the modern secular humanist and skeptical movements, professor emeritus of philosophy at the State University of New York, editor-in-chief of Free Inquiry magazine, and founder and chairman of the Council for Secular Humanism. Steve Allen, creator and original host of The Tonight Show, comedian, author, and lifelong champion of reason.
Yay.
Alan Cranston, U.S. Senator from California, 1969 to 1993. E.O. Wilson, Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Sociobiology, The Diversity of Life, and Consilience, The Unity of Knowledge. And William B. Davis, the actor who portrays the cigarette-smoking man on TV's X-Files. Ironically, for a star of one of TV's most famously pro-paranormal programs, Davis is a lifelong skeptic and atheist.
There you go.
For more information, go to http://www.seculaarhumanism.org/conference2000. And again, if you missed that, call our voicemail and we will get the information to you.
Yeah, I bet that'll be a lot of fun.
That's it for the announcements. Let's take these calls.
All right.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good. You guys seem very sincere and seem like thinkers. Have you ever considered that you might be wrong?
Sure. All the time.
Yeah.
You think through the possibility that you could be wrong?
Sure.
Does that scare you at all?
No. Why should
Really?
it? Why should it?
If you are wrong, and I mean obviously, I've read sort of on both sides, and I really appreciate you guys don't seem combative or.
Not on today's show.
It's been a good morning.
It depends. We haven't had a real hard-line, annoying fundamentalist on the.
Only when we get the mean callers.
But go ahead.
Well, and I am totally a believer in Christ, but it's interesting to me to watch. I'm not fearful of hearing other people's mindset.
Okay.
So I just wondered, is it ever, do you ever think about the fact that you could be, as do I think through those things as well.
Right.
As someone who's familiar with the religion of Islam, aren't you scared?
Familiar with Islam?
Well, praying to Christ is quite a sin there, and there's a punishment of hellfire, very similar to the Bible.
I'm not fearful of Islam. I mean, I more hold to the...
But the question is, why not?
Are you fearful you are wrong and Allah will punish you? That's what I'm asking you, because you're pretty much in the same situation we are.
Yeah. Are you fearful that maybe Zeus might really exist? Or Odin, or Wotan, or Ahura Mazda, or any of the other... as I said,
it's Christian. She's
right. But we're trying to draw an analogy.
Yeah, but let's assume for a second you've looked at all the other religions and you've decided yours is the one you're going to believe in.
I can't say that I've done that.
Okay. Well, then the question remains. Maybe if you're wrong, it might not merely be that you're going to die and be gone forever. It might be that you'll be sent to the hell of one of the other religions for not believing in them.
I wonder if they're worse than ours.
Well, okay. I just want to say one thing about this whole issue. One of the things that enabled me to wean myself off of Christianity originally was when I realized that if there was a God and he set things up so that if I didn't believe in him, I would be in torment forever, and he didn't make it patently obvious that he existed, then I couldn't possibly side with him in the first place. I would have no choice, honorably. I could have no choice but to oppose a being like that. And as soon as I realized, if there's a God, he's either a good guy and there's just nothing for me to be afraid of in thinking about these things, or else he's a bad guy and I need to be against that.
And so you think that he's a bad guy or that he doesn't exist?
I think realizing that if he was a good guy, he wouldn't mind me thinking seriously about whether he existed or not. Sure. That's what enabled me to start thinking seriously. Does he exist or not? And once I was able to do that, it became pretty clear that there's no reason to think that he exists.
So tell me this: you said that he would have to make it obviously clear.
Yeah.
How do you believe that life came into being and the beauty of the earth and things like that? Did those just happen, or I don't know what your tenets
The evidence
are.
that we have, the evidence we do have, shows that those things just arise through natural processes. That's the evidence that we have, right? There is no evidence that a God did it. All there is a claim that a God did it.
And also
that's not good enough.
notice how your phrase is already couched in a way of depicting it, the beauty of the earth, right? A very careful looking at what is going on the earth reveals that there's a tremendous lack of beauty. It's actually a really horrific thing that women, 1/3 of every woman who's ever lived died due to complications resulting from childbirth.
Actually, I'm sorry, I didn't mean the beauty of the earth regarding people. I meant literally the physical earth.
Beauty is aesthetic,
I mean,
right?
it's not. It's a very
beauty is a
talking turn.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Beauty is a judgment that we attach to something, and you can't really say that everything in nature is beautiful. A tree or a waterfall might be beautiful.
A slime mold is not.
But the Ebola virus is not beautiful. You know, and so it.
Anyway.
And another thing about the way you phrased your question. Remember, you used the phrase "just happened," and that sort of implies, we're talking about a process that takes just these amazing periods of time. It's a gradual, you start with a simple form, and then you become more complex.
Doesn't that take some faith, though? To believe
What do you mean? What do you mean by faith?
What do you mean?
The problem with the word faith is that people will use it for anything from, I have plenty of evidence that X is true.
Right.
But I realize that I can always be wrong about anything.
Sure.
And so that little tiny leap, people will call that faith. And then they'll also take, I have absolutely no evidence. I'm blind and I'm leaping across a chasm and I have no idea how far it is across, and you take a leap of faith, right? Where you have no evidence whatsoever, and people will call that faith.
Right.
I think this needs to be quantified. Okay.
Power of faith compels you.
There is a big difference between believing something when you have plenty of obvious evidence that it's true, right? Even though you got to recognize that since we're not omniscient, there could be something going on that we don't know about that undermines that, right? This all could be an illusion. We could all be in pods with electrodes attached to our heads, experiencing a big computer simulation together. We can't possibly know that, right? But there's a difference between that little amount of leap and the huge amount involved in just believing something on no evidence whatsoever. So. So we think that since all the evidence is that it's the world, what we see in the world came about through natural processes, that's what happened, because that's what the evidence is.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I do think it takes a certain leap of, I don't want to use the word faith. I don't know which word to use now.
A stumble of faith.
Just think about that. That the word faith is used for this huge range of things, and really it makes a difference. Just because it's reasonable to make those tiny leaps does not mean it's reasonable to make those huge leaps.
And I guess another reason that I wanted to call as well is to let you know that there are believers, so to speak, out there who I believe very strongly, and I live my life following that belief, but it doesn't make me a hateful person or a combative person. But I do think that a lot of times those are the people that you probably come in contact with, and I think it's a fear of our own belief. We aren't strong enough in what we believe.
Oh,
to really
no.
have an intelligent
Please don't think that. Please don't think that. Because that is exactly the danger in religion, is saying, okay, here's this body of claims that were made thousands of years ago, right?
Right.
And you can either say those claims are the advice from the people of that age, the best, the thinkers of that time about how to live and what's a good way to be, right? And you can look at that as advice and then apply it in a way that makes sense. Or you can absolutely, totally believe in just that, period, and no question about anything. And you will definitely go wrong. That is where these extremist religious movements come from, is when people say, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to question any aspect of it anymore, ever again. The Bible's got to be absolutely, literally true, word for word. That's where the danger comes in. Think about the things that you've been told to believe.
And I think that's the key, is just to continue to question.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And that's what I've done. And the honest truth is this: for me, it has made my beliefs stronger. And I think we can agree to disagree on that point.
Okay.
There were people thousands of years ago who believed in the very things that you're believing in, and you could have taken those tenets and believed those tenets continuously throughout. There were people that didn't believe back then, right?
Right.
And I think I've just continued to believe in something that has grown as a movement, as have you guys. That's why you have a TV show. People now are believing in it more.
Once again, I think earlier in the program we talked about, the definition of either belief versus non-belief and what atheism really constitutes.
Well, we're not going to quibble with that about that with this caller. We're not on that subject.
But we're down to, I guess.
Yeah, we're going to try to get one more call in. Thanks very much for your call.
One last thing I do want to say, and you guys can't laugh at me about this, but I would like you to know that I am going to pray for you.
No,
we can't stop you from
getting laughed at for that. It's completely ridiculous. But we appreciate that you would like nice things to happen to us. Thanks a lot.
Wish all the good karma.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay, one last call. We will get to Jenna. Hi.
Hi.
We're down to 5 minutes. We're sorry, but let's try to sum this up as quickly as possible. What can we do for you?
I'll talk really fast. Do you ever think atheism is kind of like a rehab for people who have figured out that Christianity is false?
Well, rehab implies a transitional phase where atheism is sort of a terminal philosophy in the sense that
I see it more as detox.
I mean, it certainly helps people who are trying to, get themselves back together after having lived all their lives with that crutch. It helps them to be able to hang out with other atheists and know that they're not lone lunatics.
But no, when you come off
lunatics in a group.
when you, for example, people who exit cults, generally there's two ways of exiting cults. One is you join another, which is essentially, in essence, is the version of the largest amount of people who get extracted from cults end up going to becoming Christians. They realize that Rama Lama Ding Dong is stupid, but Jesus Christ, well, he's the greatest, right? And see, so but now coming out of a mainstream religion, I think it's not, I would claim, actually Howard Thompson spoke a little bit about this before, but I would claim that the step is not immediately to atheism. It's sort of like, no, these people are a little weird and I don't want to participate anymore, and then it's just sort of an exit from a religious system. But actually going into atheism is more of an affirmative step that's beyond just extricating yourself from a religious belief.
And it is a process too. I mean, I didn't become I grew up going to a Baptist church, of all things. And it wasn't an immediate thing for me to just say, wait a minute, this is hogwash. I didn't it took years.
And I want to make one thing clear. Atheism is not a group.
Oh, no.
Right. There are numerous individual atheist groups where atheists congregate for one reason or another, and some of those, in some cases, that's people who just get together for mutual support that can serve that function. But it's not like Christianity where it's all organizations.
And we don't have dogmas that we're obligated to.
But if you do want help figuring out exactly why your religion is a ridiculously silly intellectual waste of time, come down to the Bagelry and we'll be happy to assist
we'll explain it.
Well, when I was 15, I realized I didn't want to be a Christian anymore because I saw the people did not truly believe what they were saying. They were just trying to make themselves believe it. And
it's funny. It's funny because, if I can just comment on that. I mean, we had our previous caller was talking about how this and that has strengthened her faith. Religion is all about just believe this stuff, right? But atheists take the claims of religious people more seriously than the religious people do themselves. When an atheist will look at the story of the walls of Jericho and the sun stopping in the sky and wonder, how could that possibly be? What would that really mean if that had really happened?
Right? They have an objective view.
Yeah, just analyzing the stuff instead of simply taking it on faith. Think about these things. Think about what the ramifications would be.
What's very interesting is very recently at the University of Texas, one of the major speakers that travels the country trying to convince people that all of these things make perfect sense. His name is Hugh Ross. Has just come and he's made the claim that no, it's the Christian position which is the objective. You got to be very careful when you use the word objective, by the way. The Christian position is the objective position, and the sun stopped for Jericho for the following obviously physically reasonable reason, so it's everybody wants to be everybody wants to be rational. It's very strange, and it's getting tougher to leave Christianity because of these people who are realizing that people are leaving because they're thinking too hard.
Yeah, that will ultimately work to their disadvantage, trying to bring in science to do their job, because it won't.
Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you
for calling.
Please, if you're looking for a atheist support group, I mean, the ACA would love to try to fit that bill for you. We meet right after the show at the Hot Jumbo Bagel Shop near the corner of 5th and Lavaca. And all atheists and atheist-friendly people are invited.
I'm sorry I was incoherent this morning.
We have less than a minute. John Coons is still on the line. I'm going to take him. John?
30 seconds.
Okay. Hi, John. 30 seconds.
I'm going to be fast. Number one, the Santa Fe team still lost badly even when they prayed to their God.
That's right.
Number two, Jeff, the things ate insects on the land. Insects evolved before, to walk on land before.
Gotcha. It was eating insects. Cool.
Bring down a picture. I may need another tattoo of that.
All right.
Also, a virgin. That was a mistranslation from a young girl.
Right.
So there's a lot of information about that.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Bye-bye, folks. Christians, we don't hate you.
We just think you're wrong.